It's time for the unofficial 40. Soonerscoop.com's very official recruiting podcast featuring Soonerscoop.com recruiting publisher Josh McCuistion. Get your recruiting fix from the leader in Sooner recruiting. It's the unofficial 40 with your hosts, Soonerscoop.com publishers Carey Murdock and Josh McCuistion.
All right, it is time again for the unofficial 40. I am Carey Murdock along with Josh McCuistion, who is in his home studio, Eddie Radosevich in our studio here. And guys, all kinds of activity to talk about. And Josh, a bevy of commitments, and you mentioned it. This class just does not seem to be slowing down. Now at 19, I noticed this morning, back up to number 4 in the country. But another big commitment yesterday for the Sooners.
Yeah, Addison Gums is a guy that, and when I hinted at it on Tuesday Notes that, it was a guy that surprised me a little bit and kind of an elite player. And for those listening that aren't familiar, he's a top 60 player in the country, one of the top 5 outside linebackers in the entire country. So this is a huge deal for Oklahoma. And the thing that stood out to me, doing the fun facts, you kind of come up with some interesting things, little nuggets that surprise you. And this, with Caleb Kelly in 2016 and Addison Gums in 2017, 2 Rivals 100 linebackers in back-to-back years, OU hasn't done that in a decade. And when they did it with previously, one of them was an Oklahoma native. Those kids are both from California. I can't think of a better embodiment of how OU is rolling right now in recruiting. And like I said in the Scoop HD kind of breakdown of that commitment, I don't think it's going to stop. I think there's still some more good news to come over the next month.
Well, this class, it doesn't. I think the only thing that you can point to say it doesn't have the Marvin Wilson. I know that's kind of everybody's starting to get on it, not on edge, but everybody's starting to wonder, are they going to get that class? Because you get that, and then you really start challenging for the number 1 spot. But in reality, for this program to go all the way to number 1, the way Alabama's been recruiting, as many 5 stars as are left out there, as many as they're not. They're not. This isn't going to be a class with 5 stars in it. It's just not going to be that. It still can finish very strong, but how much better could it realistically get?
Oh, Oklahoma is a major player, like you mentioned, for Marvin Wilson, Jeff Okudah, the number 1 safety in the country from South Grand Prairie. They're a contender there. I expect both of those guys to be at the Ohio State game. And as we've talked about before, Okudah is a guy that everybody thinks is going to Ohio State, and I think that's the right thinking at this point in time. But Oklahoma goes and wins that game and maybe even does it a little bit decisively. Who knows what that could do? Guys won't – Okudah's a smart kid. He's not going to base his decision off one game. So anybody thinking that, whoever wins gets Okudah, that's not the way that's going to work. But it definitely can turn his attention, and he can say, you know what, I don't have to go that far away from my family. I don't have to go that far from the Dallas area to go and really compete at the highest level. And I think, Oklahoma's the one school in his general area that can say – we've been to the playoffs recently. We've done all this. And to beat Ohio State at home, a night atmosphere, that game should be just out of control. And I was going to say off the chain, but, God, I'm just too white to pull that off. So,
Eddie can do it. He's young.
Yeah, Eddie can do it. Eddie can do it. You're right. It's probably too old. But either way, they got a chance there. You look at what's left. It's not a bunch of 3 stars. Adrian Ely, he's a Rivals 250 guy at offensive tackle. Caleb Shashan, he's probably going to end up in the Rivals 250. You go down the list, and the guys left are not guys that are going to be counted out. Of that top 20 recruits. You're not
going to get to evaluated offers in this class.
Yeah. I don't think you're going to have. Something will go wrong. Somebody will miss. You'll have, OU will take a 3-star maybe that they're not as over the moon about come January. That's just usually the way the numbers work out. But it's not going to be 5 or 6 of those guys. It's going to be 1, and that's okay. That's the way everybody builds classes. Whether it's Ohio State or Alabama or Florida, they've got a couple guys in there that they like more than everybody else does. And OU can be that same way. And right now, somebody said it last night. OU has more points in the rival system for the 2017 class as of August 18th than they did for the entire 2017 class, or 2016 class. That puts into perspective where OU is right now.
It's insane. That's just insane to think about, and especially how well they've done in the past couple of years. They brought in guys. They've answered, I think, some question marks in certain areas. Josh, for Oklahoma to sign these guys in February, how important is it to go out this season and have a good season, to continue building momentum and not throw down an 8-5? And would that affect some guys? I think that it would. I think that there would be some guys that defect or decommit if Oklahoma were to go 8-5 this year.
I agree. I mean, it's one of these things where people say, oh, well, look what it did for us, having this great playoff season, and look how good Oklahoma's doing in recruiting. Well, the reverse is true, too. I mean, if you're going to ride that wave and say, hey, we're competing for playoffs and we're doing all of these things as a recruiter, then at the same time, you're opening that door for a kid to come back and say, well, yeah, you just lost 3 games in Big 12 play. You finished 3rd in the conference, whatever. So if Oklahoma goes out and fires an 8 or 9 win season, I certainly don't think the class is going to fall apart. But there are going to be some guys that are going to take a look around. I think Addison Gums is a good example. I mean, one of the reasons he talked about in the story with Adam Gorney of choosing Oklahoma was because of their prestige and all the winning they do and, competing for championships. Well, that's something they can kind of lord over UCLA. But if you go out and fire the same kind of year that UCLA probably will, again, 8-9 wins, that's not something you're going to be able to say, well, UCLA can't do that, because UCLA does that about every year under Jim Mora Jr. So you just have to be careful of that. And I do think there are several guys that are you would have to look at. I think the vast majority of the class would be fine, but there would be some outliers, some guys that you would wonder a little bit about.
What also is interesting about signing this many guys this early, and I know, by the way, have we all watched Last Chance U yet now?
I think so.
I know Eddie and I had last.
I've watched it. I've watched it. Yes,
it's amazing.
Talking about academics and academic advisors. I know they're going in and doing their due diligence on guys, and they know if a kid's on track or not. And I would think that when a kid commits early, it allows him to really kind of focus in on academics maybe more. I mean, I guess it's just with the individual kid, but like you said, maybe there's kids that don't qualify. I mean, because you're going so far out, don't you kind of increase that chance of committing to a kid that might not end up making his grades?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you look at it, and you hear stories every year about a guy committed, this time of year or earlier or whatever, and a high school coach saying, and he thought he was done. He thought it had it made, and he didn't take care of what he needed to, and ends up missing his GPA by, a 10th or something. Just that stuff happens all the time. So, and we've talked about this before on the podcast. That's what impresses me the most about Oklahoma. Like, as good as they look at, and I'll use this example because it's one I like. You look at what Oklahoma's situation is in the secondary, both in their current recruiting class and, within their what's on roster right now. And Eddie talked about it with Stephen Parker, where Stephen Parker was saying, when I got here, there was 3 or 4 safeties. Now there's like 6 who can play. And I think that's a good example of what they've kind of built there between both Mike Stoops and Kerry Cooks, that they still have guys on their radar. They're not even sure they're going to take another corner, in my opinion. I think if they get the right guy, they absolutely will, but they're not sure they're going to take anyone. But they have several guys that they are still looking to, still talking to, and if anything changes, they're ready. They're ready to go offer that guy, and they've built a relationship. So I think that's where you see the difference where, I talked a little while ago about, OU won't have to scramble in January. They have a plan already in place. If this happens, then this. And that's what you saw with Trajan Bandy. There was no jumping. There was no big alarm. They knew that was a possibility, and they'd prepared for it, and they were ready for it. So I think that's the difference with what's happening right now, especially with all these early commitments. They're able to kind of build a plan, and then, whichever route things go, they can follow it up that road.
All right, I have a tangent to take you guys on. I'm just looking through the roster right now in the media guide, And let me explain kind of for people that haven't watched it. I'll try and do this without spoiling it. But Last Chance U, it's a documentary about East Mississippi Community College. It's where Jamal Danley came from.
The Colton Bester.
The Colton Besters from Scuba, Mississippi. It's in Scuba, Mississippi. And they follow all these kids, and it's really about what a handful these kids are to deal with on a daily basis. I mean, to me, that's what it's really about. It's not about how good their season's going, but there are times when they can't get kids to go to class. They're about to get kicked out of school. There's brawls on the football field. Coaches trying to get these guys to play well, and they're mostly all from Division I schools. But is it LJ Law? Is that the running back?
DJ Law.
DJ Law. He's kind of the guy they follow along the most as being a handful. His dad was in prison. He hates going to school. They're all and Ronald Ollie was the other guy, I thought.
Yeah.
Although I read a thing from her, the academic advisor. I followed
Miss
her.
Wagner.
Miss Wagner.
I'd follow comp. I would fail English comp if that meant spending a semester with her.
Eddie has a crush on. I followed her on Twitter the other day. I hope that's okay with you,
Is it a good
Eddie.
follow?
I don't know. I haven't. There's not enough evidence to
I
support
might have
it
to
yet.
do that as well.
She's got like 13,000 followers.
She really?
She follows Jamal Danley. I noticed that.
That's funny.
And so anyway, somebody's trying to call. Curtis Fitzpatrick is trying to call me. So here's my question for you guys. Give me the one guy for sure. If Last Chance U was doing an Oklahoma edition, who's the one guy that you want to see how big of a handful he is behind the scenes?
Current?
Yes. It's got to be one of two guys. I know my guys. Who I want.
Trying to think. Okay.
Yeah, I'm gonna give me a minute here.
It's easy if you go through the roster. I mean, the number one.
Joe Mixon, right?
What? Joe Mixon is number one without a doubt.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
You want to see what if they're having to force him to go to class, stuff like that. What kind of kid he is behind the scenes.
How close do you think Last Chance U stuff is? And I know it's on a very small scale, but how close do you think that is to what's going on in Norman? Just as far as
I think there are elements of that in every major college football program.
Yeah, and I'm
in
not
the
saying it's a
country.
bad thing at all. I guess it could be.
I mean, I think you are hurting kids to go to class. I think you're trying to get kids not to fail on a constant basis. I think you have confrontations at times between players and coaches that are ugly. And I think there's a bunch of knuckleheads just running around everywhere.
You know who might get a vote from me, and I'm still thinking about it. Devonta Lampkin might be on my short list just because
I can see that.
And not only, kind of like he had some academic stuff getting in, and so, you wonder if that would be interesting to follow.
Yeah.
Although I think he's a pretty sharp kid. I always did. But he's interesting to talk to. Lampkin's always very opinionated, very strong. I feel like he's one of those guys you would follow around and probably get something interesting out of him fairly regularly.
Well, for me, I have to put Jordan Thomas on this list because I just want to know. I want to know how big of a knucklehead he really is. And I've heard some things that aren't flattering, and I would want to see.
It's just crazy to think that it does sound like Jordan is a knucklehead at times, but at the same time, he's literally taking classes that were harder than any class I ever took at OU. Any
Same.
class.
Yeah.
I mean, he was talking about, I remember talking to him last year about taking biomechanical engineering. And,
Although, you know what? According to the media guide,
has he changed
he is
majors?
majoring in African American studies.
Oh, no. I don't think
that would be a whole season right there.
Just his
going
complete
from
change.
engineering to what is considered the
that's like a university major,
walk-through
right?
major. Yeah. That is considered. That's the new communications.
Wow.
That's like trump card withdrawn, because that's what we've always gone to is, well, he does these things that we can't explain, but man, he's got to be really smart. He's doing this. Well, now you just lost that. So I don't know what the what the defense is anymore for some of the things he does.
Yeah, that's news.
That's going from
we haven't discussed that on the boards or anything. I just noticed that looking through the media guide.
That's going from I'm here to get a degree to I'm getting a degree in education to I'm getting a degree in football. Yeah, exactly. That's crazy. That is some borderline newsworthy stuff right there. That I did not see that coming.
Somewhere Eric Mensick is weeping. Somewhere.
By the way, you know who my number 3 is? PJ and Banasaur. I think he might be a huge.
Is he still on the team?
Yeah.
Like literally.
Actually, he was mentioned, and I kind of glossed over this. He was mentioned by Kerry Cooks the other day. Yeah. And I just forgot about it.
Well, it's crazy just talking with, Stephen Parker. It was amazing to hear him talk about how many guys that are actually back there, kind of what Josh alluded to. What unit would be the most fun to follow? Offensive linemen, defensive linemen, quarterbacks?
I'd say quarterbacks because of Baker.
Yeah.
But if Baker's not there, because I just like to follow Baker's interaction with everybody else.
Yeah.
Plus, I'd like to see his interaction with Lincoln Riley, to be honest with you. When they're breaking down film and going over game plans and putting in game plans.
I would imagine he's pretty... sometimes I think that you see a quarterback and I don't see... I guess this might be a bad example, but Jared Goff, I don't see breaking down too many defenses.
I can't... It's like...
Well, he doesn't know where the sun rises.
It's like,
that's a problem.
How did Marshawn Lynch go to Cal? I ask myself that all the time. I watched some stupid... It's that tank men or the guys that build the tanks in Las Vegas, the fish tanks, and they built one for Marshawn Lynch and went to his house and everything. It was fascinating. But he is a moron. and maybe he's not as dumb as he kind of appears on the surface. But how did he go to Cal?
Marshawn strikes me as the guy that's savvy. He gets it from a what he needs to know level. But yeah, I mean, he's not a guy that would ever, I think, impress you with his higher learning ability.
You know who would be underrated to follow around? Austin Seibert.
Really?
Because he is super cocky. And I mean, Jay Boulware has said in the past, he has to try and keep him grounded a little bit because he's too confident at times.
It's so awesome that the kicker is the most cocky guy on the team.
I would have paid to see what,
on a team including Baker Mayfield. I mean, not just any team, but Baker is not hurting for confidence, and for Seibert to stick out in that crowd. You know who wouldn't be a bad one is Neville Gallimore.
Yeah.
Just, him being Canadian, again, kind of had the academic stuff, so you kind of wonder about that. But he's a super nice kid. Neville's one of those dudes, if you saw him walking the street, you'd be like, that does not look like the dude I want to mess with. But the second you talk to him, he smiles and he's friendly. He'd be an interesting guy to kind of see what his interactions are like.
I will say this, and this is something, I know we're getting off recruiting really early. We go back to it. But, I talked to Nick Basquin this week. His mom... Okay, so he's from a single-family home. He's a walk-on. His mom is a counselor of some sort. I would just love to see how much of a struggle it is for a walk-on day-to-day from a single-parent home that just to, have enough money to eat some days.
While everybody else just goes over to Headington and pigs out on everything. And
I'm sure he has a meal plan over there or something maybe.
How does that work, though? I mean, because there's some things that walk-ons just can't do, right?
They can't. I mean, there are some restrictions. I mean, I need to ask him about that. I mean, can he, when you walk into their setup now is they have their meeting room. It's in the old dining hall. And then next to it, they have a bunch of lounge couches and stuff, a lounging area. But then they have peanut butter and jelly sandwiches laying everywhere, all kinds of protein bars laying everywhere. They B12 drinks.
Those are good.
Can he walk in there and get those?
That's what I was wondering. Like the stuff that Tiffany Bird puts together and is always picturing. Can he be part of that?
I would feel really bad if he couldn't, because I usually snag one of those B12 things when we're in
Bob
there.
offers them to us. He's like, you guys need a B12 shot.
They make me feel good on Mondays.
So you really grab one of those?
Yeah, they're good.
Oh, I'm jealous, Eddie. That sounds good. I'm down.
So anyway, but we can get back to some team stuff. But the walk-on stuff, I'm going to write some about that. I know other people have, but yeah, I've got some stuff coming on that. Just recruiting-wise, I know Joe is taking some time and going to Florida, and he stopped by in Nashville. But anything that you took out of that, Josh or Eddie, from talking to Joe?
Well, I talked to him a little bit last night, and, Jacob doesn't want to do any interviews for the people that haven't read Joe's comments about that. He had talked to Jacob before he went out there, and he didn't really want to do any interviews, that kind of thing. He was kind of waiting. I think he feels like at this point he doesn't have a lot left to say. He's got to take his officials, kind of accumulate that information, then go on. But Joe did have a chance to talk to him, and, we'll touch a little bit on some of the stuff that Joe heard while he was there on the Scoop tomorrow. But I do get the sense that, however short the list Jacob may have, he's got his 5 right now. And I think we all, anytime you get to that level, there's 2 or 3 that kind of stick out. And I definitely get the feeling, talking to some other people and talking, to Joe from his conversations, it sounds like OU is, however short that little kind of private list is, OU should be there, whether it's 2 or 3 or, only one school's been cut out. Whatever. But, I think all 5 have a chance, but I definitely think going into the officials, Oklahoma's in just about as good a spot as anybody.
It will be, I think, just from a recruiting standpoint, I'm kind of interested to see if they change what they do on game days. Usually, if people don't know, usually people will get down there at, say it's an 11 o'clock game, guys will get down there at 8. I think they usually serve them breakfast, and then by 9:30, the recruits are actually come out to the field, and they stand with the position coaches, and while the guys go through the pregame warmups and stuff. I'm just interested if they change things this year with the new south end zone being open, with just, I guess, different things and different, I don't know, just different stuff to do down there nowadays.
Well, it's going to be tough because they're still going to be under construction in the south end zone, and we've been driving by it pretty regularly. I think they're going to get most of that brick up on the outside. I was doubtful, but it's amazing how much they get done in a week. Yeah, that outside, they're starting to get the exterior on there. They've got to get, the brick and those cement accents or whatever those things are. But yeah, it is going to be weird because I think everybody has to walk through that to get to their seats in the south end zone. So they're going to have to. They're through the facility there.
Yeah. I'm just interested how they get the players in, because last year they had that little thing where they could walk through the gate across Jenkins.
Right.
Now are the players going to walk through the
construction site? Yeah.
It's kind of weird.
All right, guys. I've got a little trivia for the first time in the podcast. I think everybody knows I'm a little bit of a sucker for trivia.
Well, you got to give away some Johnny's Charcoal Broiler?
No, I don't have. Oh, God. All right, anybody out there, if there was Johnny's Charcoal Broil to be given away, I'd be eating it. That's all there is to it. I love Johnny's and I miss it. Who is, assuming OU can land Jacob Phillips, who is the last player they signed from the state of Tennessee? When you're ready for hints, I'm ready to give them.
In the Stoops? Has it been in the Stoops era?
In the Stoops era, yep. Yeah, fairly recently, actually.
Oh, Wesley Horkey.
That's correct.
I know my deep snappers. I know deep snapper info.
Eddie is our specialist, so of course he would know it.
It would have taken me a long time to get to Wesley Horkey.
That's the only guy that I could ever think. He is the only guy from Tennessee, right?
The last one before him literally predates the Rivals database. It's Justin Williams from Memphis Trevisan, way back in 01.
See, I don't even remember.
Oh no! I was barely working for Rivals at that point. That's really going back.
I can't even remember the kid. Was he a defensive end?
He was a DB. They signed him late. He was a kid one of those kids that pops up out of the southeast that nobody knows about, and all of a sudden he had 12 offers in a couple of weeks.
I remember that kid now. He was small.
Yep. I I want to say he was a old Prop 48 guy. Like they had to get him in on that or something. There was some academic issue, if I remember right. Like either he didn't make it in or he wasn't there long. I can't remember which.
Let me ask you, I mean, we talked about, early in the show we were talking about, OU's got to have a season to back up this recruiting class. I would imagine no matter what happens, though, there's going to be somebody that just drops out. I mean, it's just, and I know that maybe that's the, woe is me OU thing that everyone has around the boards all the time. But I mean, there's got to be somebody.
Kind of the next Trajan Bandy situation that maybe should have seen it before it happened.
Yeah, well, I guess you can't. Yeah, Bandy's already dropped it, but it'd have to be somebody outside the Broyles, Barnes, Robinson circle that's so tight.
Yeah, it's not even woe is me. It's just that's just the way it works, and that's the way when you look at the numbers for Oklahoma to have the commitments they have right now. Mathematically, when you look at history of recruiting over the last 4 or 5 years, they're going to lose one or two of these guys. I don't think it's going to be any huge exodus, but odds are, for whatever reason, they'll lose a guy, and it's a guy I've talked about before, and I know the buzz has kind of died down since maybe the spring. But Trey Brown is a name that you hear come up from time to time. Like he's still talking to some schools, he's still looking around.
I remember maybe a couple of weeks ago, maybe 3 weeks ago, I saw he was going back in his TL and retweeting every person that had offered him. Mm-hmm. So he just does stuff like that, and you're like, that's interesting.
Yeah, like I wouldn't bet on it, but it's not something I would rule out either. And again, I mean, when I talk to people, they saw Bandy coming. I think with Trey Brown, there's probably a contingency in there for that. I mean, I don't think it's something that they feel so far removed from. Now, you look at a guy like Robert Barnes, and I know there was some buzz this week that he had told a Texas site, I may take an official visit down there. Well, literally one of his best friends, no, that didn't actually end up happening. I was gonna go into an Obiabo reference, but that didn't work. But really, I mean, you look at it and it's possible, but does anybody really think Robert Barnes is going to go anywhere other than Oklahoma? I don't see that at all. So, now you do get into the conversation of, does that hurt OU that a guy that's one of your main, players out there in front of things trying to tell guys.
He's bringing people to campus all the time.
Yeah. And then, but I'm still looking around. Well, that's a tough sell. I said the same when Tate Martell was looking around on A&M, but still trying to recruit everybody to A&M. You can't have that both ways.
Let me tell you, let's put it this way. Here's what's crazy about this. Like, how many 17-year-old males, stay with the same girl? Like, you jump around all the time. Like, commitment is not a big part. That's not a big part of your life when you're 17. Well, so I'm sure at some point, every one of these kids, they've been committed for somebody's going to have to say, you know what, I'm kind of want something else. I kind of want to try something different, or I'm kind of bored, or this isn't exciting like it used to. I want it to be exciting again.
They need to change it from commitment to just going with.
He's going with Oklahoma.
Yeah, for now.
Until you say taking my talents too, it doesn't count. Yeah. It's not real until
going
then.
With was I learned that's like an Oklahoma thing. Like, people don't use going with. Like, when I was a kid, if you had a girlfriend, you were going together.
But I don't know. Maybe I
don't know if it's used outside of Oklahoma.
Yeah,
much.
I don't know if that's
maybe
universal.
It's a Southern thing. I've heard it down in Texas.
Have you?
Yeah.
Yeah, it might be. I mean, it's definitely geographical, though.
But
I don't see them saying it up in Boston.
What's funny to me is it's almost, like, Carey, you hit a great point. Like, it's always, fans will be like, oh, these guys, they don't know what commitment means and blah, blah, blah. And some of those rants have died. I think people have gotten a little more used to this is the way recruiting is now. But at the same time, and you touched on, like, your wife or your girlfriend, it's the same dudes that are on an internet message board, like, mad at us because we delete a girl with, like, shaking boobs on the internet. I'm like, okay, you're telling me how serious you are about your commitment, but you're on a message board, instead of hanging out with your wife while looking at a girl.
Your bio has your wife and your 2 small children, and then you've got bouncing boobs as your signature.
Yeah, exactly. Which is fine. I'm not against that. But let's just be real and not, And we're not 17, 18. These are 30-year-old men. Like, that doesn't change. Like, you always want things to be more interesting than they actually are.
So, yeah, I mean, I trust me, I don't think we need to name any more names. I don't think we need Cale Gundy stewing. So that's a terrible thing that you guys are doing, talking about who's going to leave.
But you'd never know it if he did it.
No, because I'm blocked.
Get over it. He'll get over it.
I thought you were telling me to get over it.
No, he'll get over
it. I kind of thought you were too.
You guys want to talk about the opener, the season opener? Do a little something we haven't done on the podcast, which is I have to cut up a lot of audio anyway for radio show. But I think it might be good to kind of give you guys a summary of some of the things that we talked about with the players and the coaches. And kind of one of the storylines I'm working on, a story still yet to be printed. I'm behind, by the way. I know that. I got a bunch of stuff to crank out. Playing Houston. And it was weird, Eddie, because we walk up to practice and you see a whole group of refs.
Yeah.
This was like on a Tuesday.
No, this was Monday. That was Monday morning.
And they just scrimmaged on Saturday. And so you see all these refs flying out. And I'd gotten this email tip, or it was more of a DM from a guy that's an official, and he works the chain gang. And he was like, hey, they're asking the chain gang to come out to practice, and that never has really happened before. Is there something going on you know about? And I think what it is they just want to have people out there that can set the ball, wind the clock, get it started. So if they have like GAs doing it or trainers, they might not have the urgency that real officials do.
I think it's just different having guys that aren't with the team out there.
Yeah. I mean, they're
day.
out there. Those officials are coming out there. They're getting ready for the season. And so they're working hard to do all that stuff. And I think the reason they're doing it is because they're playing Houston, which is an up-tempo team. And let's face it, the biggest challenge in this, and we hear Mike Stoops screaming in the press box all the time, getting guys lined up before the snap and having new guys facing a tempo team. And so I talked to Mike Stoops and Tim Kish about that, how important tempo is this week in practice.
Mike, not just because it's Houston, but any team that's up tempo you start the year with, does that give you more urgency in camp? I don't know, bring more refs in more often?
It does, but our offense plays at such a high speed every day. I mean, we see everything they give us, so our quarterback's pretty athletic guy too, and creates a lot of plays with his feet. So we see that speed continuously. Every practice is like that. So that's not any different for us.
But something you're always preaching regardless, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, you have to, for young players, I think it's where you see it, just guys that aren't used to playing at that speed. But most of our veterans, guys that have started, we have got some young guys, but, and that's been something they've had to learn to do is play at this type of speed.
Is the key that just knowing your defense, knowing what the calls are?
Just knowledge, yeah, and getting comfortable and knowing what the adjustments are. But, they've done well.
Well, that's true across the board now, just with all the college offenses. And, we're spread out and you got these athletic quarterbacks that you have to defend the entire field. So you have to have athletes on the field that can do it. And, we respect all those guys that have that ability to cause us that problem. And Houston will be the first task and the only task we're thinking of right now. So, we're trying to battle back with again putting better athletes and more athletes on the field, and then having that awareness that we gotta get set and get ready because they're going to go at a high speed, and we've got to be prepared for that.
Is I know everybody's got to know what they're doing, but is Jordan Evans really critical in that situation, being the guy in the middle?
He is, just because of his experience right now. He has such a good knowledge of what offenses are doing. He understands formations, down and distances, tendencies, and all those things with personnel. So that's important for us. Jordan helps a bunch there, but the rest of them have to know it too as well, and that's my job to make sure they're ready.
Now, I haven't asked you this, Josh, but are you going to go to the game since it's in Houston?
I actually am. Myself, Tiffany M., and probably the mom-in-law will all be there. The baby is going to be left at home because that is there's no better way to put it. That's a shit show to take a child to a game. So we're going to skip that one.
Have you been the cusser before? I think he has been. Yeah, he was the cusser before.
He's now 2 and I'm 1.
Okay.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I like to take the lead.
It's always shit too. Why is it always shit? That's always the word. Is it just because that's the most?
F-bomb feels a little lead.
No, I don't want. I don't want to. I might bleep an F-bomb.
We got to get into football season mode for that to happen.
Yeah.
Like son of a bitch. How come it's never like that?
I feel like of the three of us, I think people would expect that I cuss the least, and I don't think there's any question I cuss more than you two do.
I don't know about that.
People that are around me, I cuss a lot.
Like when you went to Austin with your boys, it was F this and F you and all that.
Oh, it was like I came home that day, and it's almost like you've got to turn it off, and I was not in the mental capacity to turn it off, and I kept saying stuff to Tiffany, and you could tell she was like, stop, like, what are you talking about? Where's my husband? Where'd he go? So I had to take like 24 hours to get back into a mental mode of like, oh yeah, I'm a dad and a husband again, so...
Well, we heard about the tempo stuff. I think that's going to be huge, and it's huge on both sides. I mean, Baker Mayfield, and that's one thing a lot of Mike and Timbo said is, hey, we've got Baker Mayfield, we got a guy that runs around. He makes us chase things and get out of position, stuff like that. So if they get, and they're scrimmaging today, and so maybe that's part of it too. Maybe they want to have more scrimmages, but there's no doubt this is so different, Eddie. Having a season opener like this. Against a top 15 team that I'm trying to think. Has there ever been an opener like this in the Stoops era?
No, I think for
BYU, I guess
that's the easy comparison is BYU. I don't think that they were nearly as good as Houston, I guess, in the preseason polls. But it's just interesting that all this is happening, Carey. With they're literally 2 weeks into practice, and they're starting to kind of shift that attention to Houston. And so I think that kind of signals just how big they know this game is, how big just how big the implications it could be on their season. If you're trying to get back to a playoff, if you're trying to win a national championship, this game is very important. And I think that what has happened in the past years with Stoops teams in their first game of the season, how slow they started against Akron a season ago, how poorly they played in the first half before Sam got hurt in Dallas.
Yeah, I
think it's kind of all culminating to maybe just them being a little bit more aware of how big of a contest this could be with Houston.
By the way, I can already see Josh in the parking lot tailgating with his mother-in-law.
It's a Quino.
Having all kinds of Quino.
That's so telling because literally, like, Tiffany's family is much fancier than mine, like to a staggering degree. Like I've had moments like that. I remember one of the first meals Tiffany made me, literally, and this is not even set up, had quinoa in it. And I was like, what the hell is this? What am I eating? And and it was good, but I had no idea what it was until like halfway through. So
what was it?
But at the same time,
was it
as far as mother-in-laws go, in case she ever hears this, I'm fortunate. Like she is a tailgating lady. They tailgate for like there's a big like Christmas festival kind of thing down here. It's basically a excuse for shopping for like Christmas goods and Christmas like presents and all this stuff. And they do it right next door to NRG. So you've got that huge stadium. My mother-in-law and Tiffany and several of their friends, they tailgate this thing. Like they've got drinks out there at like 8 a.m. before the doors open and stuff. Like, so while they're definitely a lot fancier than I am, they definitely still have the tailgating roots that they need.
That's impressive.
It's not to be taken lightly. It's pretty serious.
This is the tailgate theme right here for Josh's tailgate, apparently.
Everything's in slow motion. Josh is putting on the paint on his chest.
They've got mimosas instead of beer.
You have to go mimosas before 11 a.m. I'm very passionate about that.
That's true.
I'm a Bloody Mary guy pre-11 a.m. Yeah. I can do a Bloody. That's usually the way I go.
I just don't drink before 11 a.m.
Oh, God.
That's what you need.
I don't like day drinking. I never have.
Oh,
I've tried it.
There's nothing
doesn't suit me.
There's nothing like a good solid day drink and a weekday day drink.
Of course, I use drinking to go to bed, so I'm kind of conditioned. If I don't drink something, I'll just stay up all night.
That may speak to something, Carey. I don't know what that means, but it doesn't seem good.
Before the season, I need to write a guide to day drinking column.
You like drinking and golfing, though. That's like your comfort zone.
Yeah. I like drinking and doing a lot of things.
Is it possible to play golf and not drink? Like, I don't really.
That's true.
Yeah. That seems defeatist. That seems against the whole point.
Couple club specials.
Yeah.
What's a club special?
It's like the most delicious drink in the world would be the best way to put it, but I don't even know what they put in them.
I have no idea.
Vodka and lemonade. I think it's lemonade. I don't usually watch the lady drink them.
We always, the best ones I always had were, we could actually have a whole podcast about that. The quality drinks around the Oklahoma City area. And I used to always get mine off of, on Western, one of the places down by like 39th or something. What is the name of that bar? We used to go there for years, and Club Special was literally, but you couldn't drink two. Like you don't want to get crazy on the Club Specials. Like 2, 3, you're going to go into danger pretty quickly.
Yeah, you know what used to just kill me the first time I ever had it, and it was so good. I didn't realize how much alcohol was in it, but at Louis, the Long Island iced tea,
yeah,
those will knock you on your ass.
Louis can make a good stiffy. They've made some good drinks.
Okay, here's one thing I want to talk about. And I know everybody is always interested in this, and every time we write an article, it goes bonkers on our analytics. But newcomers, new impact guys that have redshirted that they haven't heard of or heard from. And Eddie, I thought the most interesting thing that happened this week was when I asked Tim Kish about Arthur McGinnis, because I don't think anybody was like, I wonder how Arthur McGinnis is doing this year. It's like people just kind of gave up on him after last year. But here's Tim Kish.
You know what? Arthur has made the most improvement of anybody here. I mean, where he was a year ago, was less than a turtle's speed, out in the field. I mean, he just gained way too much weight, and he just wasn't, ready to move around. And I'm so proud of him right now because he's totally focused and tuned in, and he's running around. And he's doing a really good job right now. So he's given us the ability to create some depth, which is what we're trying to do right now.
And he's still working, Josh, at middle linebacker, which I always thought, okay, he gained weight, now he can just move to defensive end because he was such a dominant rush-in high school. But I mean, he's been the biggest mystery, I think, of all the guys they've signed in the last couple of years.
Yeah, I think because he was kind of that late addition to the class, not as in a guy that they didn't want, but just he took a while to make his decision. I think pretty much, Carey, for you and I, introduced us to Snapchat? Isn't that where he announced his commitment?
Yes, he did.
Yeah, and I was like, I don't know what that is. So, I'd heard of it, but I had no idea how to access it. Anyway, away from old man Josh. But, yeah, I mean, McGinnis was a guy that people forget, I know the size is an easy thing to talk about, but you mentioned it. I mean, he played a lot more defensive end in high school than he did linebacker. So everybody just assuming, well, he's big enough and he's strong enough, he's just going to go step into that role. I don't know that was very realistic, and I probably fell prey to it a little bit as well. But he needed that time. But I hadn't heard that comment or hadn't read it anywhere, Carey, where Kish was saying he had advanced more than anybody. That's pretty impressive, and something that you would have to think puts him in line to get some mop-up duty. Maybe you see him in that home opener.
Well, definitely special teams. I think he'll be a big part of that this year.
Kish actually said that he would be a part of every special teams. Yeah. I think in that interview, he's going to be a guy that can contribute in those areas.
Now, you think he'd be a good up-back kind of guy?
Yeah, I can see that.
Ooh, fake punt, Arthur McGinnis.
Throw it to him,
or just snap it to him. Let him run.
You know what would be? Or what to me is the biggest irony out of fall camp so far is all the jokes about Lackawanna and Tim Kish last year. And then it turns out that Capri Doucet and Emmanuel Beal have become the two biggest names in terms of guys that are stepping up ready to make an impact.
Yeah. It's blown me away every time that we've talked with Mike Stoops about Capri Doucet. I don't think there's a player that he's been as high on as Capri here in the last couple weeks.
Well, here's Mike right here.
He plays a lot of different positions. Again, our outside linebackers are interchangeable guys and pieces, and he has a lot of Eric in him. He's that type of speed and quickness. Doesn't have the experience Eric had at this point, but has really progressed well.
And I get the sense it's been really confusing talking to people about where he is on the field. He's basically Devontae Bond from a year ago. Like, you got Obo. I'm getting screwed. OSU has a guy named Obi now. It's a freshman receiver that's supposed to be playing. Obo is basically doing what Stryker did last year, from what I can gather. So he's going to be an outside linebacker rush edge guy. And then Will Johnson will be on the other side where Bond was. But they can replace Will Johnson with Capri Doucet and have he and Obo on the field at the same time. That's what I'm gathering out of this. It
has really tripped people out when they hear Will Johnson's name with the linebacker group, I feel like.
Yeah. But, I mean, he's a playmaker for them. He was a year ago. And now he's going to be a starter. He's going to be on the field all the time. You think about that. Steven Parker's a guy, I think he's made some plays, but I think he has so much more potential to be even better. Ahmad Thomas made a lot of plays last year. Jordan Thomas, he's really good. And then Dakota Johnson had 2 picks, I think, last year in those 3 games that he played.
He had one against Tech and one against Iowa State.
So, there's an opportunity to be a really good turnover defense.
I think they feel like if they can just get any type of rush on the quarterback, get any type of play up front, they're going to be fine on the back end.
Josh, what do you remember about Capri Doucet when he was coming out?
Well, okay, before I go into that, we've had a Dakota Johnson instead of Dakota Austin. And Carey, these are becoming almost weekly for you, the name slips.
Who the hell is Dakota Johnson?
She's an actress. I think she was the chick in
Damn it, I was
Grey.
reading this morning. I was doing show prep, and the 50 Shades of Grey thing, the sequel's coming out.
She's from Austin, though, so it's a Big 12 community.
Oh, hey, there you go.
I wake up, damn it, I wake up at 4 o'clock every morning, okay? I haven't had a nap.
Carey's on his 9th hour of radio this morning.
I am. I really am.
Oh, God.
Dakota Austin.
With Capri, I liked him coming out of high school, out of Lackawanna. What is funny to me, though, is the guy from Lackawanna that no one is talking about is the guy from Lackawanna that was a midterm guy, had a ton of huge offers, and that it was clear OU wanted from the start, and that's Ashton Julius.
Yeah.
Nobody's talking about him at all.
Never comes up.
Yeah.
He's not even in the running for the top 6 spots on the interior.
Yeah. Yeah, it's I haven't heard him mentioned once, so that's kind of funny how that comes around.
He looks.
But yeah, good. The thing that surprises me is that it seems to be in reverse. Everybody thought Doucet was going to come in and compete for that spot opposite Jordan Evans on the inside, and Beal was going to be like depth at outside linebacker. Well, now we hear Beal's working inside and Doucet's outside. And the thing that's crazy to me is when Mike compares Doucet's quickness and speed to Stryker. I thought he was super athletic, but boy, I didn't see that on tape. So if that's the case, and he can be, even in limited action, that kind of guy that can force, running backs to move away, well, then you've got, either he or Obo in blitz situations working one-on-one with a running back or a tight end. Man, that opens up a lot of possibilities with the way they can go in that package. So that's like I said, that could be a huge eventual steal. But I can say there were coaches that were very into Doucet. He had Arkansas, Arizona State. He had some good options. But, the kind of early excitement over him definitely surprises me.
And really, you can't say that Julius is a bust because him being here probably directly helped getting Doucet and Beal in. By the way, here's Mike Stoops talking about Emmanuel Beal.
He's picked up things extremely well. I think he understands what we're trying to do.
I don't know why it wasn't longer. So, yeah, there's probably a lot more to that. I don't know where it went.
Well, he knows what they want him to do, so.
But, yeah, Beal, I had heard, he had the bust on Mixon on the big 70-yard touchdown run, but I had also heard that, outside of that, he was fantastic in the first major scrimmage. And he's playing Dominic Alexander's old position.
Which will be interesting because, he was a guy, even, in this day and age of all the junior colleges having roster pages and, you see what they've got them listed at. I think they had Ashton Julius at like 6'8", 355 or something, and he shows up to OU, and I think OU's got him at like 6'5", 330. So even in that lofty, we're willing to add 30 pounds and 3 inches, Beal was like 6'2", 195. That's smaller than Dominique Alexander reported to OU out of high school. So I'm really interested to see,
he looks
I don't
like a
have any
safety.
doubt athletically he can do what they want him to do. But can he take on a guard in that three-man front? That's going to be really interesting to watch.
He looks like a safety. And, I'm not sure. Tay Evans, he's big, he's fast. He's the guy that you want in there. He's been out a lot. And I think that's been frustrating for him. I would say Doucet, from what we're hearing, Eddie, he's more the guy that can step up and be a real playmaker for you. I think Beal's more like a stopgap a little bit.
I think Beal, if Beal's making a ton of plays, something bad has happened. Is that bad to say?
He's the Brandon Crow.
Yeah. And I guess that's kind of a hit at Brandon Crow and Emmanuel Beal. But
dare you talk about Comanche like that?
I feel like I don't know. There's so much good talked about when you talk to players about a guy like Obo. If he doesn't come out and just tear it up the first 3 games, I think they're in serious trouble at linebacker.
That's a great point because
yep.
Everybody talks about what a freak he is, all the stuff he can do. I've talked to people that have said, look, he can only do one thing. Like, he can rush the passer. He's fantastic at that. If you ask him to cover people, to do things on the back end, you're in trouble.
Yeah.
And that was the same thing with Stryker, though. They had that one spring where it's like, oh, they're playing Stryker at nickel. And I was just like, yeah, that's great for practice, but that's never going to work. And it never did. They were able to get around it because I think Bond he was the guy that you remember, like the Tennessee game, I remember Bond dropping back in coverage and there was a pass he should have picked off. Like, he was really good at that stuff. So they could, when they needed somebody to drop back in coverage, they could use Bond to do that. Now, can Doucet be that guy? I don't know.
Yeah. And don't forget, Devontae Bond doesn't play in the Texas game, they lose the game.
Well, it's something even over the last couple of years,
Bond didn't play in Texas.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Yeah, I said that wrong.
When he when he was getting that spot time, you never thought like Obo doesn't belong out there athletically or physically. He just kept making mental mistakes, stuff that was really and stuff that frankly he should know. But I again kind of go back to the Arthur McGinnis point. People don't remember Obo was like not even a defensive end for Alif Taylor. He was like a defensive tackle, nose tackle for Alif at like 230 pounds. But he just was so active that he could kind of, he'd shoot gaps. But he never played anybody for strength. But it's such a massive change for him to go from kind of shading the center to I'm lining up outside of a tight end. The responsibilities are just astronomically different. But something I wanted to ask you guys, I meant to ask it earlier when we were kind of talking about the situation. You guys were talking about Will Johnson and what a great playmaker he's been for OU. My thought is, do you think it's a repercussion of a couple of years ago when they tried to make that switch from Julian Wilson from going from the nickel to playing a true corner? Do you think that's maybe why Johnson hasn't gotten that look at corner there where they clearly have a spot? Because at that point they then have 2 guys trying to adjust to new positions?
It's weird. They've always been hesitant about that. I think they just liked him at the nickel, liked him as that extra. But, he covers really well. But I think he's too small to be a safety. But, I just think that they feel like they've got better guys that can cover full time at the corner position, and he's better suited as a guy that's not handling the other team's best receivers.
He really surprised me last year. Will Johnson did. I didn't really know what to expect, but he, going back through the film and that we had of the Texas Tech game, the Kansas State game, those types of games, it was amazing to see how well he played in those games and how big of a spark plug he was almost off the bench for OU. It's going to be really interesting. I don't know if it was one of the stories that we put up on the board, but it was funny talking to Will on Tuesday, and he was telling us that the night before the Kansas State game that he started, he didn't tell any of his family that he was starting. He knew that he was starting, but he didn't tell anybody because he was so nervous. And I guess his big thing is the night before games is he sleeps on the floor. He takes all the blankets and stuff off of his hotel bed, sleeps on the floor, and blasts the heater. I don't know how people can do that, but
oh God, that's awful.
It was kind of interesting.
Now, you know, do I remember this right? Will Johnson didn't start against Texas, right? And then the next week was K-State. Am I remembering that right?
I'd have to go look at the participation report.
I think that's right. And we all know Hattori Bird started against Texas, and that was literally the end of his show, and Stephen Parker took over from there. Is there, you know, that seems like that's always been a theme. Like when OU loses that Texas game, that's when they make all these changes. Like, and changes that sometimes people have been talking about for a little while. I don't know what, I mean, do they have to lose a game? Like, I don't really understand that because I think everybody felt like Bird's got some questions here. There was always that thought that, you know, Parker maybe should have moved ahead of him, that kind of thing. Is it just like something has to go wrong to prove that the, you know, maybe the guy that we're more comfortable with has to play? That's always been a weird question for me of why it seemed like after the Texas game, especially if they lost, was when they were comfortable starting to make some real change.
Well, yeah, and I think, you know, the offensive line, that was the case there, too.
Right.
You never saw Josiah St. John start after that game, really even play.
It's amazing.
Now he's the first-round draft choice in the Canadian Football
Number 1
League.
pick.
Yeah.
Number 1.
But no, I mean, I think in the running game, I mean, they had to admit that the running game just wasn't working at that point. And they had to you remember in that game, I remember that they weren't doing the two-back stuff. And they went to that. They had Dimitri Flowers on the field a lot, and they were successful when he was on the field, but then they would go back to the single back, and it just, I mean, it made both sides of the ball, I think, take a hard look at what they were doing.
It felt like in the Mac, Bob, like the early years, OU always came out with a twist for Texas. You know, whether it was the, you know, I'm gonna blank out on something. Like the one I remember real particularly was Chioke Onyenagetcha. They ran that corner blitz on Texas that year like 5 times. Like they just kept calling it, and it kept working. And maybe they do, and we just don't notice them. But I feel like now it's become like, I wonder if it's a thing where they feel like they can just go out and do what they do and beat Texas, and not need to be that, you know, sneaky or trying to keep things back for Texas anymore. But it just doesn't seem like you see the same things before the Texas game as you do, like you mentioned, the two-back stuff after the Texas game. That's just always been interesting how that's kind of changed through the years to me.
Well, let's hit on a couple other things here. I mean, Caleb Kelly, Mark Jackson, that's something a lot of people, even coming in, even Mike Stoops left that open, like we're going to need these guys to help out. And so I think from that point, everybody's like, well, okay, maybe Caleb Kelly can challenge, Obo for that starting spot. And I think Mark Jackson is just behind technically. I think some fundamental things, just from watching him that one day in practice, you could tell, like fundamentally, he's just not there yet.
That was the day that we actually saw, like, Obo was taking him to the side and was, like, working on his hands and working on his technique.
But you could see, like, Mike was spending a lot of extra time with him, and he was getting frustrated just doing simple dummy drills and stuff because he wasn't able to do it exactly like, everybody else was doing it. So I think there's going to be a learning curve for Mark Jackson. I think Caleb Kelly, just the knee sprain, and he's back now. But if you're a true freshman, that was Charles Walker. I said, what's been the most impressive thing about Amani Bledsoe? He said, he stayed healthy. I mean, because true freshmen come in all the time. I mean, Abdul Adams has been hurt. Michael Jones has been hurt. Caleb Kelly's been hurt. Everybody, it's physically, those guys don't hold up. And Caleb Kelly hasn't been able to hold up. And it's put him behind. But I'm not saying that knocks him out for the rest of the year. I think at some point he will contribute. But he is not, the ready to go, so much better athletically than everybody else that you can't keep him off the field guy.
How much do you think it is about those first 3 games? And not to say they can't let them grow, but they need to start. They're starting to prepare for the guys that are actually going to contribute and play in the game. How much do you think that plays into that decision? If they were opening up with Louisiana, Monroe, Akron, and another bullshit team,
do
you think it would be different?
I think they'd have, more scrimmages allowing guys to get out there and get reps. Although with all the injuries, a lot of guys have been getting reps that
they've had
probably wouldn't have had reps at this point. So, but I just think the mentality, there's no question when you're opening up with, like Oklahoma State opened up with Southeast Louisiana, you're not really stressed if you don't feel like you have the exact right guard.
Yeah.
Like you can go into the opening game and say, well, we're going to throw this guy out there, and if he doesn't perform like we want him to, we'll try somebody else. You don't have that luxury going into game 1.
It's interesting. Kish was asked about it on Tuesday. Just, how big of a deal is it when you lose a guy? I think they were talking about Tay Evans. How big was it that Tay Evans has missed a couple days of practice? And, I thought it was interesting. Kish said, a couple days we can work with. When it gets past 3 days, that becomes a problem. You need to start getting those guys in there to get reps, to get even mental reps while they're standing there.
Well, and that's to me like Alvarez's situation, which is so
crazy.
Weird. I mean, we noticed yesterday OU put out a little thing on the offensive line, and you could tell they had the starting lineup out there, and Alvarez wasn't even in it.
It was Eric Wren, who, for my money, was the story of the week last week.
Yeah.
That's a real thing. That is a real thing. He could start. And then Alex Dalton, obviously back at practice,
right,
starting at right guard, and then Samia at right tackle is what the tease was.
So going into it, you've got to have some urgency. You got to get ready to go. Now, one of the big positions in camp is obviously that corner position opposite, basically the one left by Zach Sanchez. And, we've written about it, Dakota Austin. He seems to be the guy that is locking down that position. But, you have PJ and Banasaur out there. But you've also got Micaiah Quick. And his progress, I think, has been really impressive. But I did ask Mike Stoops about Quick and Austin earlier this week.
Yeah, Micaiah continues to, show progress and, push his way along. And Dakota's had a good camp as well. So, we're just trying to keep developing all our players. It'll work its way out as we get closer to game time, what our 2 deep looks like. But I still think we're a long way away from, settling a lot of positions. You got to give everyone an opportunity to compete. And, some guys are making more plays than others, but, and then other guys are just young in the process that need to continue to learn and push themselves to understand, what we're trying to do on defense. But overall, I think we're headed in a positive direction.
I think the real question we need to ask is, does Dakota Austin believe in mermaids? If you haven't watched Hard Knocks,
I could
you don't know.
see it.
I don't think he's the type of guy that he's
not putting
he's got
up with
that Lancaster attitude. He talks about it a lot. He's punching somebody if they believe in mermaids.
That's the strangest thing I've ever I tweeted about it yesterday. I don't understand the guy's case. I don't get it. I can't wrap my head around it.
I do kind of get it. He's saying that because the water would not have caught on fire, which I don't think is true, that there would have been a lot of dinosaurs in the ocean that survived. But
the ocean would have boiled, bro. It doesn't burn, but it'll cook.
Yeah, but that's his stance.
My bigger problem with...
But then people said, what about alligators? And he was like, no. So all reptiles are dinosaurs? No, that was his response.
His argument against dinosaurs was nobody'd ever seen one. But he believes in mermaids
that nobody's ever seen.
Yeah, I don't understand how that... it feels like a shtick. It's something that I don't know, like he started out with when he was like 10 and his family made fun of him to the point like he just backed into the corner. Like he's got to go roll with it now.
And why does he have dinosaurs all over in his locker?
That's weird. I didn't know if like teammates put that stuff there.
I bet that's what it is. I bet they bring their little kids dinosaurs and put them in his locker.
Well, what's his nickname? Is he Merman? Like that's what I would call him.
I can't judge the guy. Everybody believes their own things. Like I think Stevie Wonder can see. So,
well, I mean, he has a little
Really?
bit. Yeah, that is true. There's been YouTube. There are YouTube
That's
conspiracy videos out there.
That's fact. He can
that.
see. I mean, I know that 100%.
How do you know that 100%?
There's too much video out there that he can definitely see.
It shows like he's sitting down and he knows the chair is there.
There's this one like his mic stand's about to fall and he just reaches out and grabs it.
6 cents, man.
I don't know.
Have you guys seen the one about the guy that we know as Paul McCartney is not actually Paul McCartney? Like he was like a fill-in for the Beatles for now like 50 years. That's like a big conspiracy thing. Like, and there's all this proof that's supposed to be like there's a documentary about it, like about how he was some other guy and he basically just became Paul McCartney because they needed him to be that guy. And there's all these.
So this goes back to the Abbey Road thing where he didn't have shoes on.
Exactly. Yeah. Like some of that stuff. Like there
was a big Paul McCartney is dead thing.
Yep.
Yeah. Yep. Back in the 60s. Or
what
whatever.
a lucky guy.
Seriously.
It's like Dave, that show about the president.
I don't think I've seen that.
That's a fantastic show.
Oh, that's strong.
Kevin Kline.
Strong.
Kevin Kline is a presidential impersonator, and the real president has a stroke, and so they don't want the country to know that the president is in a coma.
Okay.
So they bring in the impersonator. He makes the world better because he's a better person. Sigourney Weaver's kind of hot in that.
I will need to check that out.
It's not bad. All right, we've been running on for a while. I think we're about ready to wrap it up here. Look, there's so much more to be played out in camp. I do think that we have a pretty good idea of what a 2 deep would be. I think the receiver position is still the most unknown out of all the positions that are out there. Would you agree, Eddie and Josh?
Which position?
The receiver position.
Yeah, very much. Because I do think that if there's one receiver that's I think everybody would know about through the first couple weeks of camp is A.D. Miller. And then after that, there's a lot of unproven guys. I mean, I think even a D.D. Westbrook has a little bit to prove going into the season. And I think, I was talking to a buddy last night about this. I think that everything on the offensive side of the things, everything that kind of tones everybody down is the fact that they have Samaje Perine and Joe Mixon back there. And if things go bad in the passing game, they should be able to run the ball. But you don't want to be able to, or you don't want to have to fall back on that. And, Mark Andrews he goes into the season with 19 career catches. That's going to obviously go up, but they're going to need to see a lot more play out of him. And guys like Jarvis Baxter, you don't know what you're going to get out of Jordan Smallwood, Jeffrey Mead. I mean, the list goes on and on. There's a bunch of question marks, and how is Oklahoma going to be able to fit those in? And, good thing is they're not having to break in a new quarterback. I think that obviously goes a long way, and especially with it being Baker Mayfield.
I do worry, and everyone should worry. If anybody, Clemson should worry if they lose Deshaun Watson, but that's going to be really tough if something happens and Austin Kendall has to play a big role this year.
Yeah. Well, I guess that's why
you
I
have
say
those running backs,
you can put it back onto the running backs.
Yeah.
And
just let him do a little bit.
I think I put it on the board a couple weeks ago. I'm probably going to be wrong about this, but I'm buying big time into Dimitri Flowers and how they use him.
Wow.
One of the things that's interesting to me is, and I know you guys.
Sorry, I'm texting about something while you're doing this. we have. I'm just gonna. I won't say what it is, but it is 12:40, and there's a bad story that's getting ready to happen.
Oh. In our market,
it involves OU football, and it's not. It's health related.
Oh,
so I'll just say that.
Okay,
damn,
that's not good.
Oh,
is Austin Kendall now the starting quarterback?
Never mind. Hold on.
We're getting breaking news via text. Hold on, everyone.
Okay. So we had gotten a post on the board while we're doing this podcast that, see, now this is going to get out there and then people are going to be mad, but told that Bill Bedenbow had passed out and an ambulance came. And all that's true. But I'm now getting word that everything is fine. He got dehydrated, and it's going to be okay. So
It's scary.
See, this is one of those things. Like, I'll take you inside since we're on the podcast. Like, it showed up on the board.
I've deleted it twice.
Eddie deleted it. I'm going to have to go address it. But at the same time, it's like, it's probably going to be bad that it even has to get addressed because nothing's going to come out of it. But it's like, this stuff now that most times wouldn't get out. And it's just at this age we're in where everybody has a cell phone or knows somebody. It's just weird. I mean, we're doing the podcast and I'm having to try and track this down. And we did, and everything's going to be fine. But I don't know. I don't know what I'm saying. It's really strange.
Stuff happens.
I feel terrible.
Eddie remembers we had an incident earlier during the 5-star where a recruit was talking about one of the assistant coaches and they had some, I guess you'd say, Eddie, I don't want to give away too much, some familiar illnesses within each of their families. Some stuff had happened similarly to each of them. And we had to get in touch with the coach and be like, listen, do you want to keep this quiet? And we did. We had to kind of squash it and run a little different angle on the story. But I mean, that stuff just gets out. It's not anybody's, the person posting on the board was not ill-intentioned. And certainly the recruit that was talking about it was doing it out of just an interview, just a basic interview, just answering a simple question. And he was answering it the best he could. And so it ended up kind of releasing some information that maybe wasn't supposed to be out there. So, I mean, that stuff, it just happens. And, like you said, it's kind of one of those things where it's almost impossible to keep stuff like that quiet where 10, 15 years ago, nobody would have ever known about this.
Yeah. So anyway, I mean, I'm going to put something on the board, but yeah, I guess Bill Bedenbow got dehydrated, passed out, ambulance came, getting some fluids, and he's going to be fine. But a little bit of a scary situation after
definitely not
today.
Something that you want to read about, just knowing how intense he is.
Whew. And yeah, I mean, he's a big guy and he's very intense. And the thing that's weird is those coaches, like, they're protecting themselves from skin cancer, so they're always wearing long sleeve stuff. I mean, like, they're out there in the sun and they're, either wearing sweats or full, pullovers. So they're sweating their butts off. Yeah, they're losing a lot of water.
And the crazy thing,
and it's all
too,
because
is
they don't want to have their skin always getting exposed to the sun and develop skin cancer.
And the wild thing, I guess, today would be a huge teaching point just for the fact that it's not a hot day up here.
No,
I mean, it's overcast. It's
Yeah.
perfect out. But obviously, very scary stuff, and good to hear that he's going to be okay.
So anyway, yeah, that's how our podcast ends, with me scrambling to try and find something out.
There's always something going on, whether these people want to believe it or not.
Yeah, and normally, like, we'd hear about that and it wouldn't be on the board and we could just let it go, but it's come up a couple times. I'm sure people have seen it, and that's something we always kind of battle. But anyway, before we get out here, Josh, anything you want to add on the recruiting front?
Nothing beyond what we talked about. I mean, I think, there's still some guys left to watch. Anthony Hines, you look into 2018, I think guys like Josh Proctor are still worth keeping an eye on. Eddie's going to go actually see him, and Patrick Fields, another in-state offer that I think is definitely considering his OU offer right now. I mean, so there is going to be, I think, more action. Like I've said, I guess in our podcast last week, I think by, maybe that Ohio State game, there might be 4 or 5 spots left in Oklahoma's class. I mean, that may be it. It's really starting to get down to the nuts and bolts. And like we talked about, it's a great situation for OU. They can have, their 9-man staff focused on maybe 9 guys. I mean, you can really zero in on your last few targets.
Well, and then you wait and see, does Cameron Rising kind of become the guy that starts working on the 2018 class.
Absolutely. I think, as the season goes on, you'll start to see momentum build in that direction as 2017 starts to become, kind of in the books as far as Oklahoma's concerned, if, like we talked about, the season's going like they want it to.
All right, well, that's going to do it. We'll be back again next week as we start entering game prep.
It'll be football mode next week.
Classes start on Monday. Two-a-days will end. We'll try and find out anything we can. I know OU's probably going to do a write-up on this scrimmage like they did on Saturday. So being that it's not a Saturday, not as many people will be there. So I don't know how much I'll actually hear about today's scrimmage. Anyway, for Josh McCuistion, who is back home, Eddie Radosevich, appreciate him coming down to studio to record this today. I'm Carey Murdock, and we will see you guys next time on the Unofficial 40.